Takhmina, let's get into it.
Henry! Yeah, let's go.
Virtually. Okay. One of my dear friends here in Spain, also my tennis coach. But let's really talk about where you came from first, because I feel like
hmm
your native homeland is essential to your story here. So
Oh, yeah,
talk about
definitely.
the motherland.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm from Tajikistan. I was born and raised there till the age of 14. Yeah, and I love everything about Tajikistan. The reason I moved to Spain was because of tennis. As Brianna said, I'm her tennis coach, but I used to be a professional tennis player. Yeah, so when I was 7, I started to play there, and I kind of, like fell in love with that sport and just kept playing and playing. And, in Tajikistan, we don't have, uh, let's say, the same opportunities or conditions to be a professional tennis players. I mean, you can get till until a certain level, but if you decide that you want to go pro, then you have to go somewhere else, right? And yeah, and that's what I did. But Tajikistan is definitely, you know, um, a huge part of me and my family still lives there, and my parents and I go there. I try to go there like every year, sometimes every 6 months, and yeah, I love being there. It's like my place of I go there and I kind of feel recharged. I feel like now I'm ready to like go for it.
Deal with the things. Yeah. So
Exactly.
what was your childhood like? What is something okay,
hmm
so for people who don't know, like I didn't, I'm just gonna admit my ignorance here. I did not know where
It's okay.
Tajikistan was when I first met you a year
Yeah.
ago. I had to look it up on a map. It's part of what I like to call the Stan clan. So like
Uh-huh.
Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. So it's over there.
Exactly. All the
It's over
tans.
there. The Stan clan. Which I mean that with total love in my heart. So that's where on the map. So tell us what it's like. You know, the climate, the weather,
Yeah.
the living conditions, like all of the things
Yeah.
that we
Okay.
like I didn't know about.
Yeah, not many people know actually where Tajikistan is. So I'm kind of used to it. No worries.
I'm gonna
It's
put
a
up a
very
map.
small country yeah, it's okay. In Central Asia, it's beautiful. Like almost 93% of the country are mountains. So we have mountains, we have lakes, and the nature there is just beautiful. We actually have a lot of tourists coming every year, more and more because they want to explore the nature, the beautiful, like mountains and all that. Yeah, from all over the world, like also like from the US. And it's a long trip, it's a long journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, oh well, um Tajikistan, it's like because I can compare, like I've been living in Spain for already like over 15 years, so I can compare, right? Like the life in Tajikistan and what are the differences. So Tajikistan is like a different world, like it has its pros and cons. So like to meet the people there, like the kindest people, like let's say if you're coming from a different country, and you have to you don't have, I don't know, the Airbnb or whatever, you don't have where to stay and
Yeah.
sleep at night, they're gonna let you stay at their home. Like even if they don't have much, they gonna, put everything that they have on the table. They gonna treat you like one of, like a family member almost, because they
Hmm.
kind and they like when people come from abroad and yeah, that's something very special about Tajik people, I would say. And the traditions there are different, still nowadays, like young people, they um they get married at a very young age, like around, I don't know, 18, 19, max 20, yeah, and they usually, they tend to have a lot of kids by that age, so I'm kind of,
You
you
old.
know, breaking all the patterns there, the rules, the traditions. They're like, you 13, you still not married, and don't have kids. So yeah, it's more like an old school vibe. In that case. But yeah, that's about the traditions and like how people live. Also, the cons, I would say that there's a lot of rich people and poor people, because like the
Yeah.
salaries they vary low, they vary little, and most of the people, they just trying to survive, unless they have a really good job, they speak several languages and all that. So it's not like in Spain, for example, where there are maybe not so many like rich people and like wealthy people, and most of them, they have like a medium level, right? Like a good, nice level of life, and there's no much difference, let's say, like drastic difference between like poor people or rich people. So, and that's the case in Tajikistan, unfortunately. So
Is it
yeah, the
easy for you guys to travel around
oh
like the
no, not at
world?
all. Like, well, it
No,
depends.
not at all.
Not at all. I
So
mean, it
she says
depends
not at
where
all.
you it depends where you want to go. Like, definitely there are countries where, like, let's say we have like a friendly relationship
Right.
with them, so it's easier to get there, such as like Turkey or well, like all the neighbors, right? Like Kazakhstan and all the countries, like even like China. It's easier to get there because they closer, and we have like some kind of you know
Agreements, probably.
nice, yeah, relationships and stuff. But and maybe even the US, because like I know that a lot of Tajik people live in US, and they have good jobs, and they have kids there, like their kids grow up
Hmm.
there, go to school, so they based there and they live there and they super happy. So it's not like, for example, people who moved to Russia from Tajikistan, because Tajikistan used to be one of the, Soviet Union's republics, right?
So sorry.
Ex-Soviet Union's USSR. So that's also the reason I speak Russian.
What other
And
languages do you speak just while you since
yeah,
you mentioned
well,
it?
Tajik, Russian, English, and Spanish.
And then what is Tajik similar to? Like if you had to put it in a
It's
group.
Persian. It's like
Okay,
Persian. Yeah.
similar.
Similar, yeah. And so it's not like people moving to Russia in order to, like earn a little bit more of money, and they work there, but then they send their money to Tajikistan to help their families and, raise the children and stuff. It's different. So people who like move to Europe or the US, they actually have a pretty nice life there, right? So yeah, and going back to the visa and traveling a question, it's easier if you're going to the neighbor countries, right? Or maybe even Dubai. We don't need a visa to go to Dubai or Turkey or Russia or like, I don't know, maybe even like Bulgaria, like smaller countries, But when it comes to Europe, God, it's so not easy. I mean, if you want to if you want to do tourism and just spend, let's say, a couple of weeks, right? It's obviously it's easy, right? But if you actually want to like live there and move to another
Yeah.
country, it's a completely different story, It's a whole process. So yeah, there are. ups, like pros and cons, as I said, of having a Tajik passport. But I'm glad I was born there. I love my country. I love everything about it, and I'm so grateful that I grew up there because of the I don't know, because of the maybe the way I think, things that I appreciate in life, the like kind of like my perspective to life, because I see that for example in Europe it's completely different.
Yes,
The way
absolutely.
kids grow up, the way they treat uh their parents or their teachers or family members. And I'm not saying it's worse or better. It's just different.
Different. Yeah.
And I like that, that I was born there and I grew up there because it gave me so much, and uh, and when I moved to Spain, it was easier to me to kind of adapt, I guess.
Yeah. So I looked this up just for context because I think sometimes we forget as Americans in particular, we like an American passport can get you into 183 countries.
I know.
A Tajik passport can get you into 58. So
Oh,
just for like,
58? I didn't know.
yeah,
I just knew there were like a very
yes,
small amount of countries. Yeah.
specific. So I just think
Number,
it's
yeah.
interesting, like talking about immigration, passports, visas. Like a lot of places, you still have to have a visa, just to travel to visit, not even like stay long term. I think it's really
Yeah.
important that people understand that, because of the different economic and political alliances and relationships, that not everybody has the flex as much flexibility to move about the world and learn and understand things the
Oh
way
yeah.
many countries in the West do.
Oh
So
yeah.
you had quite a shift coming from this, a little bit of a smaller country, smaller population,
Hmm.
Muslim background,
Yeah.
into a very Catholic,
Oh yeah. Such a
more
contrast.
westernized, like
I know.
world. Talk about
I'm
that transition a little bit,
Oh
especially at
yeah.
14. Like,
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say, especially when you're just 14, when you're a teenager. And it was like I remember like my first months in Spain because my mom brought me, so she stayed with me for the first month and then she went back to Tajikistan and I
wow,
had to stay with yeah, well, that's what most of us were doing back then, because like not every family could afford like moving everyone together,
right.
and staying because like that was very expensive. So I stayed with the Spanish grandma. Like I didn't know her. She was like 70, maybe 60 something. And I stayed with her the first, I think, month or two. And I didn't speak any Spanish. Like the only word I know was hola, which is hi. That's all I knew. And I would mess up and then after that I learned adios, which is like bye. And I would mess up and so every time her, daughters will come, like sons with their kids and stuff, and they would be like hi, like hola, and I would be like adios, like saying bye. So that's how bad my Spanish was, like I didn't know anything. So yeah, and I remember like freaking out. I just freaked out. I was like, oh my God, this is so different. Like the way kids um like behave, and just like this kind of a freedom they have. And when I say freedom, I mean like uh, it's not a mandatory to be like super respectful, let's say, to like anyone. Like they are respectful, but like the way they, for example, like talk to their parents or to the teachers or like even to uh, friends' parents, which is like coming from Tajikistan. that's number one thing, like being like extra respectful to someone who is older than you, like your tone has to be very like you have to be very calm, you have to be very like paying all your attention, and like super grateful and all that stuff. And here it's kind of just, like easy going, I would say. And
Yeah.
also it makes you have a closer maybe relationship with people,
Yeah.
because uh you just can be, yourself and not worry about like, oh, what will they think if I,
Mhm.
like just talk to them as if they were my friends and not parents or teachers or
Right.
whatever, so and also I think the food, like the way they
Yes.
their diet, because you in Tajikistan, we usually have like the first plate. Let's say we like liquids like soups, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing you have, like especially in winter time, soups, and then like I don't know, rice or meat or whatever you want, right? But here it was they just basically don't exist. Like you have gazpacho, which is like a cold soup, right?
Yeah.
And some I don't know how they call it in English. In Spanish, they're purés, like like creamy soups. I guess I don't know how they call.
This here. No.
No, well, purés, and then maybe a couple, two more, but they don't usually like they eat salads, pasta, a lot of bread, which is delicious. The bread in Spain is just delicious. I mean, everyone, gains weight when they move to Spain because you just can't help it, like, and the food is very, like, it's super delicious, but it's just different. So I had to adapt to that, you
Well,
know.
and being
Yeah.
Muslim, there's a lot of pork here, which
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I was
you
like,
can't eat.
I don't eat jamon, and I remember when I moved out. Like I lived with that Spanish grandma for the first 2 months, I believe, and then I moved to another Spanish family with like kids, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember they would like cook for us and all that. And I remember they asking me like, "So what do you eat?" And I was like, "Everything except pork. Like I don't eat pork." And they were like, "What do you mean you don't eat pork? Everything we eat has pork, you know?"
Yeah,
And I'm
it's
like,
true.
well, yeah, I don't. Like, I've never tried jamon, for example. And everyone's like, oh, it's so delicious, like you have to. I don't. So, and then they were like, oh, okay. And they had to kind of adapt to to what I eat. And they also found out, I remember my Spanish mom saying, "Oh my God, we actually you actually can like cook a lot of things without pork, but just because they were yeah, but just because they were so used to, to pork, at first they were like shocked. Yeah,
Oh
but
my
then
God,
we
that's so
figured
funny.
out. Yeah, so the food, the mentality, the everything was so different. I felt like coming from another world.
So how
Yeah.
was that for you and your parents? Like, from what you understand, when you moved here, like you were 14 years old,
Yeah.
leaving very traditional religious country for one that's not, it's traditional in its own way, very
Mhm.
religious but in another capacity.
Yeah.
And how was that experience for you transitioning, and how was that transition for your parents, like letting you go, because that's, I feel like it's
Oh,
a
I
big
still,
thing.
yeah, it's just so brave, and, and
True.
especially because I'm an only child, you know, and I'm very close to my parents, and I remember the first year was very challenging,
Yeah.
maybe like the most challenging because like I would miss them a lot, they would miss me, even though they
Hmm.
would come visit me. It's different. Like we used to spend 24 hours together, every day, and because we had that bond, and it's what like when you have brothers or sisters, I feel like it's still hard, but it's a little easier because you have other kids around you, right?
Yeah.
But when you only have one kid, and it's not like moving from Italy to France, right? It's like moving
Right.
from Tajikistan to Spain. It's so
It's a
far
couple
away.
minutes. Couple minutes.
Exactly. So it's super far away. And back then, because I moved in 2008 and we still didn't have, all those apps and like WhatsApps, like video
Mm.
calls, there was Skype there, but again, you needed a laptop for that, like, and because of the time difference also, like, so yeah, we would just call and, try to like stay in touch every day, but it's been, yeah, it's been uh, a tough transition, for all of us, for me, especially for my parents. And I was thinking, like, oh my God, like I can't even imagine having a kid, and just sending her to like another, like part of the world just because of her love for tennis, because it was my dream, I was like, I was so convinced that I wanted to be a tennis pro that I was like, I'm going to Spain. And the reason I chose Spain was because I was obsessed with Rafael Nadal. Like all our, house was like, yeah, covered with bummers and like like the posters of Rafa, and yeah, it was just something. And I think like my parents played a huge role in all this because um, I started to play when I was 7, and by the age of 10, I had a clear vision that the only thing I wanted to do in my life was to play tennis. And I
That's
remember
awesome.
yeah, I said to them like because it was already getting like difficult to combine like studying and traveling, playing tournaments, trainings and all that. And they were like, hey, maybe you can just play tennis for fun as a hobby, and like focus on studying. They just asked me, and I was like, what? No. Like tennis is my life. And I was 10. And I was like, and I was so serious about it. I was like, tennis is my life. I want to be a tennis pro. And they were like, "Oh, okay." And they actually listened to me. And they were like, imagine a 10-year-old coming to you and saying, "No, I'm not studying. I'm going to Spain to play tennis." And they supported me and they were like, "All right, I guess we're going to Spain." And so yeah, and again, like that was like I was supposed to move to Spain when I was 11, but because of the visa,
Mm.
it got so complicated because we don't in Tajikistan we don't have Spanish embassy. We have
Mm.
to go to Kazakhstan, which is like a different country, and it's quite far from us. So I remember we flew to Kazakhstan, and the first time we applied for the visa, it got rejected. Then we did it again, and guess what? It got rejected again. And it took us 3 years back then
Oh,
to
wow.
get the visa for me, not for my parents, because they only needed a normal visa, like touristic visa for 3 months, but I
Hmm.
needed like a long-term stay in Spain, right? And that's why it took us so long, and yeah,
Did
I was
did
actually
they
13. Mm-hmm.
did they say why it was rejected, or do you remember?
Well, I
Just
only
curious.
remember the second time it got rejected because there was kind of a tension between Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, and people. I'm serious.
Always
So
something.
I re yeah, always something, and I remember like so clearly, so vividly. Then we were like standing there. We just got there and we were applying the all the documents and stuff. And usually they like take them and they
Hmm.
study them and they get back to you within the next month or two, right? And she didn't. She just saw the woman that was working there. She just saw passports, she was like, Tajikistan? And then and then she went, boom, she sailed it as rejected. She didn't even, that was the second time because of that tension between Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. And they just, I don't know, it was a little bit of, I don't want to say all the Kazakh people, but that woman in particular, you could tell she just hated Tajik people, and she was like, "You going to Spain? Not gonna happen," So she used that power that she had just to like, yeah,
Yeah, does she mess with you?
uh, exactly. I was
Seems
gonna use
like,
another
seems
word,
like.
but yeah.
You can
So
use
yeah,
whatever words you want.
and I remember we standing there like, first of all, it's a lot of money, it's
Yeah.
expensive to get a visa, and it's a lot of time, and I was like 12, I think, and I just cried. I was like, my dream is never gonna come true. Like, there's no way I'm gonna go to Spain. And my mom was like, honey, like, it's gonna be okay. Okay, we're gonna try next time, and I'm sure next time we're gonna get. So I was like, this is so unfair. And I was so angry, at her because but you feel helpless, like you feel like there's nothing you can do because she got the power, and it's unfair, but it is what it is. So that was my only memory, like why it got rejected. The first time I didn't go because I was too small. My parents went, but it didn't work out. But then, yeah, the second time that happened, and the third time we finally got it, and I was able to come to Spain. Yeah, so it's already then, like even being like in Tajikistan, it all like I was like, if only I knew what was ahead of me, when
If
I
only, right?
made that decision of moving to Spain and being a prom. I would think twice. I wouldn't change my mind for sure, but I would maybe, I'd be more ready,
Well, I
especially
also feel like it's,
psychologically.
oh yeah, psychologically, that's a good point. I also feel like it shows your tenacity and drive for what you wanted. Like, yeah, like you obviously
Yeah,
had moments of disappointment. You're a kid, you're
yeah,
crying, of course,
yeah.
but like also you were persistent, and it paid
Oh
off. So I
yeah.
think which is what you
But
need to be a
also
tennis player.
my parents, because I know you talk a lot about parenting and kids. I'm not parent yet, hopefully one day, but I just admire my parents so much because of how they like raised me, how they always respected my opinion. They always
Mm,
supported me in everything, even though, because they could have said, like, hey, you 10, what do you know about life and what you want to do? You studying and we staying here, period.
right.
You know? But also, like, it's not like my parents were millionaires, And for Tajikistan, as I said, like, there's a very small percentage of people who have who like in between, not
Like
poor,
middle
not
class.
middle class,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and we were like middle class. I mean, we had a nice life and everything, but it's not like, we could afford like paying, hundreds of thousands of euros a
Yes.
year for tennis because tennis is a very expensive sport, and especially being a girl in Tajikistan. Hello, you know, you're not allowed to leave your daughter alone in a different country without
Yeah.
any family member who is gonna watch, after her, or, and like running on tennis courts with like short tennis dresses and t-shirts and like wanting to be an athlete and not a wife and not a mother and not a, you know what I'm saying? So we completely broke all the not expectations, but like rules,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a
and
really good
and
point.
also there, like I couldn't do like I can do it on my own. I was able to, take those big steps because of the support of my parents. My parents
Mm,
were like, "You love this. All we want is for you to be happy, and if this makes you happy, then we're going for it. You're doing this, and
that's so wonderful.
doesn't matter what people say, you want to go to Spain and play tennis and try to be a pro because that's your dream.
Yeah,
Okay, let's do it. And like still nowadays, like they're always gonna be the naysayers, right?
it's true.
Who's gonna like tell you what to do and how you should live and how you should like parent or
Mm.
like treat your kid and stuff, and you like, I didn't even ask for your advice. Like, mind your own business, like leave me alone. Exactly, like leave me live my life the way and it's not like I'm hurting someone or I'm doing something wrong. No, I'm just like living a different life that you like decided to live. And I'm not saying your life is worse than mine. We're just different and it's okay, right?
So did
But
you run have any issues with like prejudice because of this decision
oh
that
yeah,
you like within the
my
Tajik
country.
population? Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Like every time I would come home for Christmas, for New Year's Eve and stuff, and people just like not that much my family members, 'cause they have like a little bit they have a different point of view, like they
right.
more like us, right? Because they all, so the difference between like Tajik people and let's say my parents who are also like Tajik, but it's where they studied, like what schools they attended, they went to. Because of the Soviet Union, my mom and my both, well, my mom, not my dad. My dad went to like a regular Tajik school, so
Okay.
his Tajik is super good, and my mom went to the Russian school, so she
Gotcha.
would, get the Soviet Union education, like all
Okay.
the worldwide known like authors, writers, and
Yeah.
so she would travel. And also when she started to work, she used to work as a stewardess, so she traveled all the Soviet Union, and she met some great actors of that time. So she has like a different background, I guess,
Yeah.
rather than people who only like who went to Tajik school and got a more like a traditional education, or more like the way it used to be, the way it's now. Like, so girls, they have to, like, yeah, be smart, but most importantly, know how to cook, how to like, be a good daughter, yeah, a good like wife and stuff. So it's also the always the priority is for your future to be like a housewife, and nowadays, yeah, yeah, I'm serious. And
I
nowadays
believe
it got better. It got better because a lot of girls, they can drive. Back like 10 years ago, it was a big deal. Like, you driving? Like, your husband lets you drive? Like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah. And here, you turn 18 and you have to get your driving license. Like
Right.
it's not like so you see the difference in um
Absolutely.
people getting divorced, for example, a woman deciding to get divorced is a huge thing, like because everyone is gonna judge you, you know? So, or for example, like working.
Yeah.
There are a lot of working women right now, or like business women, you know, like oh, and I'm so happy because like I go there every year and I can see the difference that it's getting better and better and it's becoming more like they becoming
Inclusive?
a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more, you know, and not that it's a good thing to be traditional, but I think it becomes toxic when you think you're right and everyone has to leave the way you think it's right. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So
I agree
every
with
time
that.
I would go, they would be like, "Hey, like, don't go back. You have to stay. It's time to get married. It's time to have kids. Like, what are you doing there playing tennis and wasting your time? Like, you're not
Yeah.
allowed." And all that, and it could be a taxi driver, you know? And I'm like, dude, like, you don't even know me, you know? But
God.
then the neighbors, the neighbors, you know. As I said, my family member not that much because they all went to Russian school, so they are like more like easygoing um in that let's say subject, yeah. They not that um they still traditional, but they're like you're playing tennis, all right, like it's your
Yeah.
life, you know. But people who you don't really know well, you know, friends of friends or like neighbors or like random people who you just met. Like, oh, what's she doing? Oh, how old are you? Oh, really? And are you married? And I'm like, is it like everything has to do only with the marriage and like having kids and it's like
Yeah.
the only,
But it sounds like your mom was pretty progressive as well, if she was a
oh
flight
yeah,
attendant. And
definitely.
it kind of feels like what they would call, especially like in the late early 1900s or late 1800s, like a finishing school. Like women were educated so they could be, or especially like in the upper echelon of societies. I started being more educated because that way they could engage with men more intellectually and they could be a source of conversation for parties. But they still had, and this is like obviously in Western society, so
Mm-hmm.
and this is just generalities, but it kind of feels like there has been, and like you're saying, it's opening up more, this idea that women belong home and in the kitchen and just having babies and taking
Oh
care of the
yeah,
house. And then the more exposure you have to other ways of life,
it triggers
um,
people.
yeah, it triggers people. And I get it. Like you don't want the way things to change. And you can see that too a bit in Valencia. There's a very specific way of doing things. And there's really good, and I always say that's why I personally like appreciate the Catholic Church. There's a very specific tradition, routine. Um, but it's still more about like opening up the church doors for all, and depending on the pope, you get that bit of an influence. And so that's kind of like what I'm hearing you saying, is that there's this beautiful sense of tradition and like duty, but also you know in other parts of the country and in other types of education systems, like there's an idea that yeah, we love our country and we love what we've nurtured here, but we can still be welcoming to this new
Exactly.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And also my mom, she went to I think you call it college or university
Yeah.
was what I
University.
don't, yeah,
Either
university.
one.
Yeah. And uh she graduated in like she was studying languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there were two languages she studied. One of them was I don't know, French or German, I don't remember, but the main one was English. So, yeah, she used to speak very good English, which was also not very common in Tajikistan, you know, and she used to actually, when she graduated for some like a short period of time, she worked at school and she would teach English to kids, you know. So I remember, like, she was so demanding on, like, you know, your English has to be good. Like, if you want to live in Europe, like, you have to go. And even when I moved here, I would take, you know, private lessons, English, Spanish, you know, between my training process and like practices. Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I think like everything I am today and I have is because of my parents and my mom, you know, like especially being a woman in Tajikistan and like making this happen. Like my dad, he, you know, he loves me a lot and he also was super supportive because dads, let's talk about this. Like dads are usually, yeah, dads are usually not that mm, um I don't want to use I don't know, like the right word would be like they very protective, all right, in Tajikistan, and all they want is to have their daughter next to them and make sure the daughter, you know, marries a nice guy, you know, and that guy takes, you know, all the you know, takes care of the daughter and so she can have a nice life and have kids and like, you know, the focus
Mhm.
and is on that rather than, oh, she wants to play tennis and be a professional athlete and she wants to live on her own, you know, she's 14. So it's he also was super supportive and like you know, he paid all of that, like all my training process and all that. And also like them, like my mom and dad being a team, you know, and supporting me with this whole idea. It's I would say it's an exception, you know, in Tajikistan rather than a common thing. And I'm so glad that I was lucky enough to, you know, have all these experiences because of them, because, you know, because of their support and yeah, their love.
So you've been in Spain now for 15 years. How have you been able
Mhm.
to maintain your residency and all
Oh
those
yeah, that's
with all that?
another story. That's another topic. Well, because I yeah, because of the well, I moved here when I was 14 and we all of us, like not only me, all of us, we would have like a student visa that allowed you to stay for a year, but then you had to like renew it every year. We were staying at the academy, at the tennis academy. So for the first like uh how many, like over 10 years, I would just, you know, renew it every year. Which was also like um not an easy process,
Process.
you
Yeah.
know.
Sounds
Yeah,
like a lot.
a lot, yeah. And you know, it depends. I guess it depends. Like, I'm sure. I don't guess. I'm sure that it depends on the country you're coming from, you
Mhm.
know. So it's easier or you know more complicated process to be able to live here legally, you know. And
Yeah.
exactly because a lot of people they just come and they just stay, and after a certain period of time you know, they get their residency. Um,
That's one thing I thought was
yes.
really interesting too. Is like I hear some people's stories and I'm like, you think that only happens in the US, and then you come here and you hear all these
No,
things about how people just came and never left. And you're just like,
exactly.
how did you do that? Because like they're so very regimented, at least in my
I
experience,
know.
like that
Yeah.
you have to do all of these things. And I'm like, so how did you get away with that? Like you've been illegal for
Exactly.
10 years and now you're
A
legal,
lot.
like whoosh, like I go
Yeah, and now you have a
understand.
Spanish passport, you know?
Ha!
Yeah,
How?
well, it's yeah, it's such a journey, you know,
Okay.
and it's so not easy to find. First of all, you have to find a good lawyer, which is also a challenge, you know. They're not even like the most expensive one or the highest ranked, you know, whatever. There is no guarantee that they're gonna solve your problem, and I've
Right.
been through that process, you know. So, yeah, first thing you have to do is to find a good lawyer, but also I feel like it's a bit of a luck, you know, because I
I
have
think it
some
is.
friends who like had like at some point they had issues with their residency, and then you know they found a lawyer for like 350 euros that would solve it, you know, within like 2 months. And I was like, wow, like I paid thousands of euros, you
And
know,
got
and
nothing.
people would mess up and I would be like, you know, I wish I knew this, and I would saved all that money, because like the result is even worse than it used to be when I came to you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, yeah, you kind of become an expert yourself, you know,
Yeah.
when you renewing it every year.
And then,
So,
so when did you have to transition from a student visa? Or have
well,
you?
when I moved, yeah, during the when the pandemic hit, you know, all the
Mm.
tennis club, everything was just closed. Like you couldn't play tennis. Also, by that time, I was combining coaching and training myself as a player, because that visa, like the student visa, it allows you to work certain amounts of hours a week, you know, so you at least could do that, but not full-time job. Full, yeah, exactly. So when the pandemic hit, I was offered to move to Marbella, which is the south of Spain, to work full time, but in order to do that, I had to like change the status of my visa from the
Okay.
student visa to like the residency, like a permission to work, right? And that was a whole process too, because I remember we applied for it, and it was, I believe, January 2021, because the pandemic hit in 2020, December, if I'm not mistaken. And no, wait.
It's March
Yeah, exactly.
2020.
2020. Yeah. Well, we applied it like after a few months after the pandemic hit, and that's when the war started in Ukraine in February. So instead of like 3 months of waiting, we had to wait almost a year because of
Ah,
all the people coming as refugees. So like it's kind of like everything affects you know, your let's say legal situation in Spain, right? And it was a long time of waiting, you know, and it got rejected because of I remember what was the reason. Also, they like very strict. They
yeah.
like because I still had my, because I didn't want to be illegal in Spain after like, oh, like 12 years of being legal. I was like, yeah, I just want to change the type of my, you know, Spanish ID or whatever. And again, my lawyer was like, oh, we have to go this way and not this way and try this type. And I was like, all right, but don't make me like you know, be illegal here. So my student visa would expire, I believe, in December, and we applied for the change like a few months before, like in September or November, and they rejected it because they said, "Oh, you still have this residency which is not expired yet, so we're not gonna give you this new one, because
Huh.
like you, in order to get this one, you have to be illegal." And I'm like, wait a minute, like you want
Doesn't
me
make
like,
sense.
exactly, like you want me to be illegal in order to be after like be. And I was
Right.
like, it doesn't make any sense to me, and it got rejected. And I was like, how can like someone who lives in Spain for over 10 years playing tennis legally, not
Right.
just I came and stayed, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And just because I wanted to change that type, you making me waste a year, because that year that I stayed in Spain, it just gone, and yeah, and then the second time, yeah, we have to apply for the second time with the same, company, and then they didn't like the company. Girl, it was, yeah, a hell of a experience. But what I'm trying to say is that yeah, I wanted to change that during the pandemic, which was the timing was very bad, you know.
Everything
Yeah,
takes
because
longer.
of like the pandemic, the wars and everything, right? Plus they didn't like something about the company, and then I just moved back to Valencia, and tried it with the academy again, but already like as a coach, you know.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, but like it's been it took me years, and you like it's such a long time that you cannot leave Spain, you can't travel, like
Right.
you can get a job, like, and it's not pleasant situation. You know what I'm saying? You kind of get stuck.
Yeah. You
And
can't you can't leave because then you can't get back.
exactly,
So, but you can't
it's
work because nothing's approved. So it's like this gray
exactly, and you're
area of like,
waiting. And I remember one time, even with the student visa, um, I don't remember what happened back then, like that in that particular story, but I remember it took them 10 months to reply, to give an answer, because you apply for it, and by law they have 3 months, they have to respond in 3 months. If there is no reply, you can appeal it or wherever. And something happened, but they didn't get back to me in 10 months, and I was like, hey, like, am I getting my student visa again for next year or no? Like,
yeah,
and after 10 months they said, oh yes, it's finally approved, so go get, yeah, you have to like print your how do they call, like, when you have to leave your fingerprint and then wait for a
yeah.
month to get physically the card.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally got it after 11 months, and guess what? Like, in a month, she was expiring because it took them 11 months. And I was like, so I finally have my like new student visa
Yeah. Now you
just
gotta
for
go
a
again.
month, just for a month, because it took them over 10 months to do it. So yeah, it's just crazy story. And sometimes I think maybe it's just me, you know. But then talking to my other friends, who are also, from other countries, who are like expats, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like it's not an easy process, and sometimes it takes several rejections and years, until you finally get it.
Well,
So
it's kind of like in Tajikistan when she stamped you rejected. It all depends on so many factors,
things
like
that you cannot
yeah,
control,
who's
and it's
reading your
not about you.
application, yeah, when they're
Exactly.
reading
And you
it,
like,
what their background is. There's so many. And then like just this week, a friend of mine, her visa was supposed to be approved, and then they changed the law on May 20th, and now she's not a candidate for it. And you're just like, what? Like, huh?
yeah,
Like, how does that
yeah.
even work? Like,
And if I, for example, and everyone like in Tajikistan, they ask me, well, you live here for 15 years and you still don't have like the nationality, you still don't have you don't
so
get the passport.
I looked into that. Spain does not allow Spanish passport, like, or especially like duplicitous, like you can't have two with Spanish passport unless you're from like a previously colonized Spanish, unless you're from like a country that was previously a Spanish colony. So if you're from like
Yeah.
Colombia, Argentina, Chile, yeah, fine, sure. But like me, I would have to renounce my US citizenship in order to be a
Oh,
Spanish
really?
citizen. Hmm.
Because I know some tennis players, professional tennis players, who are Spanish, but they were born in the US.
But if
So
they're
I guess
Spanish, but that's different because they're Spanish. But because I'm
because their
American,
parents are Spanish, but they were born
exactly.
in the US.
But then you have
So
like
in
that
that case, you can have
probably.
two passports.
I don't know. I don't know if there's like different
Mm,
rules for that, but I know like for me in particular and you in particular,
yeah.
you would have to like renounce your Tajik
Oh,
passport, and I
yeah.
would have to
Oh,
renounce the US passport. And I think that
yeah.
means I
That's so
think that's
sad.
even if you're married to a Spaniard, I think, but I could be totally wrong. So yeah, they don't let you
Yeah.
have dual citizenships unless
So
you were a
I
colony.
remember asking my lawyers like so okay, so if I go this path, like is there any guarantee that I'm gonna get it? Or if I do this, and they go, well, because to me it's so white and black, it's so
Yeah,
obvious. And they're like, no, it all depends on
a
the
million things.
there's no, he says, even like with the judges and stuff, because when you apply, then the judge has to take the decision whether to give it to you or not. And I'm like, even when the judge is like, studying the case and stuff, and they go, oh no, because there are laws and there are like judges, and it depends on how the judge um la interpretación, like interprets, like
Interprets. Yeah,
yeah, like
interprets.
how he sees it. And I'm like, what do you mean how he sees it? Like, don't you
Yeah.
guys have laws? Like, if something is white and then something is black is but oh no, it depends on how he sees it.
It's
So
great.
it doesn't even
It's great.
depend on you, right? And I was just shocked, and I was like, so there's no guarantee, like no matter what you do, there's just no guarantee. So if you're lucky enough, you get it quickly, but if not,
Yeah, it's there's a lot of gray in immigration because they're taking so many factors and considering so many different things.
yeah.
And so like for like, when we applied for our visa, we did it in country because you could apply for a 3-year visa versus a 1-year visa,
Oh
and that
yeah.
way, you can kind of like anchor yourself, and then once you're here for 5 years, then you can apply for like residency. So there's
Yeah.
that. So in your travels though, like have you had any issues like traveling to and from Spain, even with like a valid visa? Has that ever been an issue for you?
Well, no, usually when you have your Spanish residency, you can, freely travel around Europe, except I remember one time, um, I flew to Switzerland, but instead of my physical visa, I had like a certificate, right, that
Hmm.
says her visa is already approved, but she's gonna have it physically in a month or so, but she has to travel, during this month. So like Spain allows her to like travel legally and stuff. And uh it was legit, like it was, true. And they were like, "Oh no, no, you can't." Like, and I was already in Zurich. I was already in Switzerland. I'm like, "What do you mean I can't fly? Like, what do you want me to do?" And they're like, "You're not allowed to like come to Switzerland with this. You need your physical like residency." And I'm like, "Dude, but like you Europe, like what are you talking about?" But yeah, and then they let me, but I felt like there was a bit of a stress, like even when you have everything, you think you have everything under control, but no.
Surprise!
Surprise!
What is
Yeah.
something you wish you would have known about
Oh
moving
yeah. Well,
that?
definitely I wish I've known that the student visa, like the years you live in Spain with the student visa, they don't count as a residency.
That's
So
right.
exactly. So like if I, let's say instead of having a student visa, I had the just a regular residency.
Mhm.
After a year, you can apply for the one for 5 years, I guess, and after 5 years, you can apply for the one for 10 years. And that means that you don't have to worry for 5 years about, about that stuff. And then 10 years living just, with that Spanish residency and traveling all around the world. Not all around the world, all around Europe, right? Without any difficulty. I wish I knew that because like right now, all those like 10 years that I lived as a, even 12 as a student in Spain, but because I was in a tennis academy, that's actually what I was doing as a student, right? But like it was sports, not like academic, you know.
Right.
Uh, um, those years they just don't count.
That sucks.
I
It
know.
just
That's a
sucks.
bummer. I
So you've been
know.
here. You're more Spanish than probably a lot of Spanish people, and you
Also,
can't.
what feels a little bit unfair is that you see people like I've traveled all around Spain. I speak Spanish. They say like a native, and like I have Spanish friends. I'm so um how do you say anchored here? I don't
Yeah,
know how
anchored.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, anchored
Mm-hmm.
here. And I feel like Spain is my second home,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to like go through all those processes, and like in order just to be able to live in Spain legally, because I also could be like, oh, you know what, I don't care. I'm just gonna live here 3 years illegally and see what happens. And maybe after 3 years, like I get my resonate like some people do. And I'm not judging them. I'm just saying that I didn't want that, and I tried to do things in the right way, and then it ended up being so complicated, so unfair that I was like, you just end up burned out, and
Yeah.
then you see, and on top of it, you see people who don't speak Spanish. They lived here illegally, and they have all the
Yeah.
residency and everything, and you're like, so what are you trying to say with this? So you want
Mm-hmm.
me to go the wrong way in order to have the right
Yeah.
result? That
Follow the
feels
rules and you get screwed.
exactly. Yeah, just because they played it smart, they tried the easiest way. I don't know, like maybe that's something I'm very concerned about the system here, how effective it is, and like if you're not from Europe, if you're not from Spain, they hard on you. Like I'm not
Yeah.
saying that people, because people are lovely here, and I've never felt any kind of a racism or something, the nicest people I've met, um what I'm talking about the system, like the system
Yeah.
could be better. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of
But
bureaucracy. Things
yeah,
don't always add
exactly.
up.
Yeah, because I thought like the Spain was like the all this stuff was working, better than in other countries, but yeah, it's still not perfect yet.
Yeah, I always like to say that immigration is a very case by case situation. Like, not everything that works for one family or person is gonna be taken
Yeah.
into consideration for another individual or family. And that it just comes down to like what's the portfolio they're looking at. Ugh. So, and
Yeah.
it is frustrating because you do everything right, you follow the rules, you follow the processes, and then you could still end up shit out of
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah, and it's disappointing,
It's definitely disappointing.
Yeah.
I'm curious to learn how you keep some of your like Tajik culture and heritage alive and fuse it into your Spanish lifestyle.
You mean Yeah, like the culture, the traditions, or like
Yeah, do
the
you observe
mindset.
anything or do you just kind of like,
From that, so like, what do I take from Tajikistan and use
yeah,
it in Spain, you mean?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, that's a good question, actually. Um, I never thought about this. Well, when when I go home, I usually bring some, my friends, they love some like dry fruits from Tajikistan that are
Uh,
very like specific. So they're all, oh, bring me this, bring me that. When I feel like I miss Tajikistan, like my homeland a lot, I try to watch like interviews in Tajik or like listen to Tajik music and stuff. But mm, mostly I think that what helps me to kind of balance those two, right, is the approach to life. Uh, because in Tajikistan, life is it's hard, like I feel like people have to survive, in order to have a good life, or in order to like um have a family like with kids and stuff, and they want their kids to have a better life, and it's always a struggle. It's always like overcoming obstacles and stuff, and people don't complain. They are so happy with so less, like so
Interesting.
little. And versus like here in Spain, they have such a nice level of life,
Mm,
comparing to Tajikistan, most of them. And kids have so much more than, for example, kids in Tajikistan, and to me is so empowering and so like inspiring. I admire them a lot that they still happy. Like they happy and they grateful for the life they have. And some of them they don't wanna leave Tajikistan. They like I love everything about my country. I love, I want to say some want a better life, and they move, or they send their kids to study, abroad and stuff. But what I mean is like the mindset, the approach to life, when you don't have that much. And uh to
yep.
me, like your life uh, looks like seems hard, and tough, but you are happy. And you don't complain, and you're grateful, and you're being nice to other people.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me. And I'm just like, wow. Sometimes, I kind of lose that, and I start to like we always want more and better, and
Right.
when there is some goal, and you can't like you see that there's no way you're gonna reach this, or like you didn't achieve what you thought you would achieve by this time, you kind of feel depressed or something. And then I'm just like, a lot of people would dream,
Yeah.
to have a life that I have here, with all these facilities and opportunities, and
Yeah.
the lifestyle. And I'm just, complaining here about how my life is, that is not like cool enough, or like happy enough, or successful enough, or whatever you want to call it, or and you kind of focus on what you don't have. And then I'm like, I remember like, you know seeing people who would just, sell stuff and like in the streets, like some vegetables or whatever, for just for such a small amount of money, and you can tell that they struggle, like maybe they don't even have a washing machine, like, and they have to like wash their clothes in winter, with cold water, like by hands, and they're so happy and they're so nice to you, and it's not fake. I mean, you can feel
Right.
it when people just being open and like, um,
Yeah.
just being them, the way they
Mm-hmm.
are. And I'm like, wow, like this is so, so cool, I wish I could keep that, and
So you
yeah,
strive to maintain that
appreciate,
mentality.
yeah, like appreciate everything you have, because not many people got the opportunities that I had.
Yeah, no, that's a really good thing. I think that's just a general thing that we always, especially I'll say from like a Western perspective, it's always like be more, do more, get more, have more. And it's like, but
Yeah.
bigger and more isn't always better, you know? Sometimes you lose yourself, your soul, your direction, your purpose by striving for external validation or value as opposed to being like wholesome and grateful for everything that does come your way. And then you find, crazy enough, sometimes when you're grateful for what you do have, you get more of it. So you're like, wow,
Exactly.
like, wow, look at that
Exactly.
abundance.
And like I'm not saying you don't have to aspire for more. Of course, yes, as
Yeah.
long as it makes you happy, but do not like burn out during that process like we all do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about people in Tajikistan is that they so real. Like they so about like having friends at home, like drinking tea, because we have a lot of like the teas in Tajikistan is like another podcast, because there's a lot of culture of drinking tea, like in most of the Central Asian, like
Yeah, makes sense.
countries. Yeah, so they so real, and like you don't need like some of them, they don't have like fancy houses, or like they very humble, but when you go there, it's so real. Like there's no filters or anything, and they appreciate like things that you cannot buy in life, such as like health, family, kids, friends, and like relationships,
Right.
and
Gotta
it's so,
cultivate
yeah,
those.
it's my source of energy every time I go home.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice or insight for people who are, coping with or struggling with any immigration issues
Oh,
based
well,
on
as
your
I
experiences?
said, yeah. Because I'm so experienced on this already. Yeah,
Should have been a
well,
lawyer. You
oh,
should have been a
but
lawyer.
such a tough profession, I think, like being a lawyer, I just I couldn't, it's so stressful also. Like unless they pay you a lot, I think you know,
Yeah,
it's not worth it from my perspective. Sorry to all the lawyers. It's just so hard.
it's a lot to
Um,
know. Stay on top
yeah.
of.
Well, my advice would be, first of all, like get informed as much as you can. Like maybe before you start working with some particular lawyer, try to talk to different lawyers first, see their perspective, see what they can offer you, balance that, right? Also, it's always better to work with someone who maybe through friends or your surroundings, like having some kind of a positive feedbacks on that lawyer, which is all,
Yeah.
again, it's not a guarantee, right? But at least it's something. You know who he worked or she worked with, right? What was the outcome, and there's at least some little trust, right from the beginning. Yeah, so finding a good lawyer also, like, Like for example, I never like to um dive in, in all, that immigration stuff, but you have to, like, you have to be prepared. You have to know what are your rights, what you can do, what you cannot do, because they can mess up. They can make mistakes. Even good lawyers make mistakes, but then they're like, I'm sorry, but you are the one in trouble. And you're like, excuse me, like, I paid
Thanks
you
for
to do
that.
you exactly, like, it's not enough. Like, finding a good, like a decent lawyer and just paying for their job doesn't mean you're gonna get your problem solved. You have to know yourself. At least, I'm not saying like go to lawyers courses, but at least like some research, on the internet,
And rights.
asking people who went through kind of similar,
Yeah.
processes. Like, you have to have like a base, because otherwise, you can be in trouble. Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
true.
Believe
It's so
me.
true. Sometimes it's
Believe
good
me.
when governments don't respond to you because then you're, automatically approved for things
Yeah,
by
yeah,
default.
yeah,
Is there
exactly.
anything we didn't know we needed to know? Anything else?
Uh, you didn't know that you needed to know. You mean regarding
Like,
this, like
yeah,
the
anything you
visa
can think
stuff?
of that was like, actually, this would have been good to know 10,
Oh
15 years
yeah,
ago.
don't ever go through a trial. Never. Unless you're Spanish, but we're talking here about people who are not Spanish. So, trials, bad idea. Don't go through court, don't go through judges, because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, a lot of your mental health, and most likely the result, like the outcome, won't be the one you expect it to be, even when everything is obvious. Like, even when you are 200% right, the other person is wrong, everyone sees it. I mean, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I know what you're talking
Like,
about.
and I'm not gonna go through details, into details right now, but I went through that, and I wish I knew that that wasn't gonna help, and that there's a lot of, um how to call it, uh so if you
Just
think that
justice isn't
exactly the
always served.
justice, correct, if you think that the justice is going to be on your side because you right, or you're the victim, right, and the other part is wrong, and you can have a bunch of proofs, right?
Right.
Hundred, thousands of proofs. You can have witnesses. You can have whatever, and believe me, it won't help. It won't help if you're dealing with if the person or the company or whatever you have on the other side is from Spain. No, no, it's very rare. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. If you have to and there is no chance and you go through it and you win the case, great, excellent. But I feel like that happens, like, I don't know, maybe 10% of the time, best case scenario, so it's not worth it. You just save your money, your
Your
time, your, mental health,
well-being.
and just spend it, just go to the Maldives or the Ibiza, something.
Instead.
Yeah, instead, that's it. That's better investment.
Oh, well, thank you, Takhmina. I really appreciate you
Oh, thank
sharing your expat
you.
adventure, your
I
immigration
loved
story.
it. Yeah.
I'm the mom
I
who
hope
knows
it
nada.
helps to someone,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it's helpful, and maybe I answered some questions that someone is right now asking themselves, and be like, oh, should I do this? Should I? Just by sharing your experience, if you're helping someone, it's already a big thing.
Yeah, You never know.
You never know.
Every little bit helps. I'm the mom who knows nada. My name is Brianna. This has been Takhmina, and we'll see you next time for everything you didn't know you needed